Hello, tennis players. How are you today? We're going to do a little tennis tip today, and I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Frank Swope, Director of Tennis Management for USTA Florida, and we're going to talk about situational shot selection. So if you can say that 3 times, you're on the right track for today's lesson. And also you can see my prop for the day. Behind me is our net. And some of you, or all of you, probably recognize that. So it's a hot commodity these days, and it's recyclable. So we're going to go from there, and we'll talk a little bit about some tennis today. So I've got my trusty ball and my racket in my hand, and we're going to do a couple of things in talking about situational tennis, and basically that's what you've learned and how you apply your shots, your technique, and your things that you've acquired over the years in tennis into how it relates during a point or a particular set or match, game, anything that you want to talk about as far as how you choose your shot selection. And the situation in tennis has a lot to do with that. For example, a forehand from the baseline, where most people learn to play, from their forehand and backhand, can be a little different to vastly different depending on your level of play to when you move toward the net and or work at the net with a volley. The technique is different there, and how that gets learned and how often you practice which types of shots to hit. So today, for example, if we were to use our best shot the most often, that we'd like to, at least if our cross-court forehand is our best weapon, we'd like to use that as often as we can into play, as much as that doesn't meld in, hopefully, with your opponent's play. But if their cross-court forehand is also their best shot, could be an interesting day for you, because you'll be hitting a lot of cross-court forehands together. But more or less, you're always trying to get back and forth and get an edge on your opponent in some way or another. And sometimes those things require some adaptation on the court, whereas it may not be the perfect forehand for you, or your forehand may not match up well with somebody else's forehand. So then you have to rely on other tools, and you're always trying to use your strengths more than your opponent is, and realize that they're having to try to do the same thing to you. And so just a couple of quick tips. If you're near the baseline and you're trying to rally just forehands and backhands, and particularly if you have a two-handed backhand, sometimes they're a little easier adapted to a high ball. But if you're getting a lot of high balls around the baseline and it's causing you some issues, then you can adjust your position on the court, which would be situational, so that you make some adjustments there and can handle the ball. The idea would be to get the ball in the strike zone, which would be up to the shoulder level and a little higher than the knees, ideally. And that's where, generally speaking, you have your best shot of executing a good shot or a stable shot, something that you can repeat and duplicate throughout a match and be successful with. So again, going back to the baseline briefly, if we're talking about a high forehand and you need to hit a ball higher over the net for depth, and you have a little bit of topspin on the ball, and you can hit a topspin forehand, the idea would be start your racket out closer to the level of the ball. And for this example, the ball's about head height, so it's a little higher out of my strike zone, so it's not going to be really normally an real aggressive shot. It would have to fall into the situation of either neutral to defensive, especially if I'm off my rear foot. If I'm on my front foot and moving forward inside the baseline, I might have more of an opportunity to start the racket up a little higher and strike the ball a little harder, firmer, and flatter, so to be able to take an advantage during the point. But assuming I'm behind the baseline and the ball's up at head height, I want to start my racket a little below the ball and then strike up on it a little bit, get a little high elevation, and try and use that 78 to 82 feet of court, depending on whether you're hitting down the line or cross court. So those are the ideas on a high ball from the baseline. If you're fortunate enough to get most of the balls in your strike zone, you have a couple of different options. But generally speaking, again, on the forehand, from the baseline, you're going to start your racket out a little lower than the ball so that you can strike up and clear the net effectively, and put a little topspin on the ball. It would be the same for the backhand at that height, in the strike zone. And again, a two-hander may have a little more of an opportunity to to be able to handle that higher ball with the left hand on the racket, or your opposite hand, whether you're right or left-handed. Your opposite, the non-dominant hand, can help you control the ball, and it's almost like a left-handed forehand up there, or a right-handed forehand if you're a left-hander. So that helps you with those higher balls and gives you a little advantage on the high balls for a two-handed backhand volley or backhand ground stroke. The same thing in the strike zone. If you have a two-hander, you can often have a little more power and a little more stability with both hands on the racket. As one of them, the palm is facing forward, as is on a natural forehand. On a one-handed forehand, the palm side is a little stronger, a little more natural swing. So that helps folks a little bit on either side. And if the ball drops below knee level at the baseline, you can do one of two things: move forward to the ball a little bit, so that that ball does stay up in your strike zone, or if you have to move too far and can't reach it in time, then you should adapt and open the racket face a little bit, so that when you actually hit the ball, that you're actually going to clear the net by some margin. Hopefully, it'll clear the net by a foot to 2 or 3 feet, depending on how hard you're hitting the ball and from what position on the court. So a low ball, knee level or below, would often have a racket that's opened up a little bit, and you can apply a little slice to it for control, or you can flatten it out and hit it. But again, having to clear the net and keep it in the court depends on how hard you're trying to hit the ball and what you can do with it and your skill level. So that would be applicable on either side, forehand or backhand. And if you had to hit a two-hander here, again, it's a little easier to execute. If it's much lower than the knee level, then you're going to have to drop the one hand generally, and go to a one-handed slice or an open face racket, which would give a little elevation to the ball naturally from below the ball. I do see a lot of times even players that, especially when you're moving into the court, which we'll cover in a second, but what happens is they get very used to striking the ball in their strike zone and don't really have the ability or understand the ability to be able to transition their racket to different heights and speeds and racket swing, the backswing. So if you're moving forward into the court and your ball is here at waist level, it's again pretty easy to execute. That's where you're trained more often than not. How people learn the game is to keep the ball into the strike zone, rightfully so. But in this case, when you come forward, what I sometimes see, if the ball again comes up a little higher, a player will drop their racket way, way below the level of the height of the ball that's in its bounce. So it takes a lot longer to swing from low to high when you're having to traverse that much distance. So it's better to keep the ball or the racket a little below the ball, or you could adjust your position, and the ball will either drop or be on the rise, which is a little more difficult shot. When the ball is falling, it's traveling a little slower, so sometimes, but then you have to hit off your rear foot if you're not prepared. So in any case, you adjust your racket height to the height of the ball where you're going to strike it. And then you have to, of course, either adjust your grip and or speed of the ball and swing so that you can prepare and motivate the ball in the direction with the right speed so that it stays in the court and hopefully provides an advantage to you. And that's off the forehand or the backhand side. If you get up around the net into the service box, one of two things. You can take it as an approach shot, or if you're already in that position, you take that ball as a volley, and of course you typically use a much shorter swing on the volley. Why? Because you're already in a position to be up closer to the net, the ball gets to you quicker, and to take a big backswing at the net takes usually a lot of risk because you're eliminating that 80 feet of court that you had, or 78 feet of court you had to work with from baseline to baseline. All of a sudden you're only working with about 40 to 50 feet of court to hit to. So you have to be careful on the height over the net with the ball, the amount of spin you put on the ball, and the speed with which you hit it. Or you have to be just very accomplished so that you can execute a good volley or an approach shot. And one more quick thing I wanted to talk to you about, either forehand or backhand again, one-handed or two-handed, is when you're coming into a shot forward, forehand again or backhand. In this case, I'm going to demonstrate the backhand. But as you're coming forward to the net, if you've got a two-handed backhand, oftentimes you can use that two-hander and hit it just like I executed and showed you on the forehand. The racket might be slightly below the ball. Or if you really have a potent backhand and good control, and you want to hit down on that ball a little bit, you can do it when the ball's up high and you're moving it forward and you've got good position, you're well balanced, your timing is good. So those things come in, and when you see a pro execute an approach shot, they rarely miss one. They've got it down to an art. They're very, very talented and very practiced in how they're going to attack the ball to garner an advantage so that they can get to the net and then put the ball away if they have a second shot to have to hit it to net. But the same on the forehand, when you get the racket up near the ball, and again, if you can get the racket above the ball and you can hit down on it, or with a little bit of topspin and a firm ball, you can control a lot of shots. The problem lies for the average player that their technique may not allow them to hit much spin. They may automatically or have learned a flatter ball, which is not unlikely. And then to be able to hit a ball over the certain part of the net, within a net where you're not going to hit below the net and into the net, and you're not going to be able to hit it too high and out. So you have to moderate your power a little bit. So when a player comes into the service line, and again, you're working with about 50 feet of court to hit to and to clear the net, then the ball, you have to strike it with an exact amount of precision for it to be within that range for it to get over. So you either hit it well, or you hit it a little high, or you hit it a little low, or with too much power, and it goes in, out, or in the net. So you've got some not so good options there. Spin helps you on both sides, forehand or backhand, create a little bit of control, and that's where the pros excel. So finally, when you get up to the net for your volley, make sure you're keeping your racket out in front. And again, time is of the essence at the net. You don't really have a lot of time to be able to take a big backswing most times, unless somebody throws up a lob, and then you'd be able to hit an overhead. But be prepared up at the net, keep your racket out in front, execute a short backswing, and poke the ball into the area of the court where you have some openings. And that generally either elicits a weak ball back, or that you can win the point outright on the volley. But that again is an adjustment to be made. And if the ball is below the net level on a very short ball or a drop shot, you have to really open your racket face, all right? So that you can get the ball back up over the net. And usually that's where you would use a little softer hands and grip so that you get a little touch, and the ball that has the effect of coming over the net with a very softer, easy ball, but with control, and so that the ball bounces lower to your opponent. Hopefully you can stay alive in the point. But if you come up to the net on a ball that's knee level and below, and are trying to hit topspin from 4 or 5 feet away from the net, even if you get there in time, very, very difficult shot to execute. So you're better off with a little bit of underspin or opening the racket face. Again, a little bit of an adjustment. So those are kind of situational tips. Nothing too technical with that. Hopefully you can build that into your game and start to work at a little better expertise around those shots that look so easy for the pros at the approach shot level and moving into the court and around the service box area and a little beyond, because that's where they can really win some points and have an effect. From baseline to baseline, you see it all the time. They have some great rallies, and anybody's guess who's going to win the point. The better mover a lot of times comes out on top. Somebody that has a lot of patience and grit, and somebody that can execute shot after shot. But that, again, they're used to having that situational awareness and can vary their racket speed, their spins, their position on the court, their foot speed to help them out. And that's where it would help also the average everyday player out in the courts. Hope to see you soon, and we'll be back in touch. Thanks. Bye.